Good morning, everybody. My name is Sarah Veal, and I'm an accredited transformational coach, inner child practitioner, equine facilitated coach, and master Reiki practitioner. I'm a member of the Association of Coaching, and all of my coaching complies with the AC's Code of Ethics and Competencies. So today I am going to talk to you about love versus fear. So living a heart-led and healthy life beyond the labels of a mentally constructed version of reality. So what does that actually mean? When I thought about what I wanted to speak about today, one of my favourite books popped into my head, The Alchemist, and a quote from that wonderful book by Paulo Coelho is, maybe the journey isn't so much about becoming anything. Maybe it's about unbecoming everything that isn't really you, so that you can be who you were meant to be in the first place. So my presentation today is based on my personal story and my healing journey, and my 10 years of coaching experience and ongoing commitment to deepen and develop my practice in order to be a clean and safe container for clients to go wherever they need to go in sessions, and in accordance with my professional body's code of ethics, but also to understand myself at a deeper level so that I can be the happiest, healthiest version of myself. So I'm a lifelong learner, and I believe the more we learn, the less we actually know. If we think we know it all, we definitely don't. So this presentation today is based on my beliefs and my truth. And we all, of course, have our own truths based on our own history, our own values, our own experiences, and our own beliefs. And I'm offering my perspective and sharing my story, and I hope that some of you will resonate with it. So I have a free guide, 5 ways to live a heart-led and healthy life. And if you'd like a copy of that, please go ahead and scan that QR code on the screen now. And I'm also writing a book about my healing journey called Trust. And if you'd like updates to that book, then please go ahead and scan the QR code at the bottom of that slide. So when I had a career change and I did my first postgraduate in business and personal coaching 10 years ago, little did I know the journey of self-discovery and growth that it was going to take me on. In my early days of coaching, I worked really hard to think of good questions and help the client raise awareness of what they maybe were doing or not doing, so they could take responsibility for making different choices, doing things differently in order to make positive choices, positive changes in their life. But I had limited awareness of what was going on in my body, or in the 95% unconscious programming in my mind that I now know was controlling my thoughts and my feelings and my behaviour. Dr. Bruce Lipton, who's been a huge source of inspiration to me over the years, with his work around epigenetics and how our beliefs shape what manifests in our body, said that 95% of your life is coming from your subconscious program. Your life is a printout of your subconscious, and the things that you wish, desire, and work hard for may not always be supported by the ingrained program you have. But what would your life be like if you learned that you are more powerful than you've ever been taught? And that sums up beautifully what I'd like to share with you today. When I retrained in equine facilitated coaching in 2018, and that's working with horses to support individuals to understand themselves at a deeper level, to understand that 95% unconscious programming that was potentially controlling their lives. I underwent a year-long deep therapeutic and healing process as I started to make the connection between the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the energetic aspects of myself. And I started to unearth limiting beliefs and parts of myself lurking in the shadows of my unconscious mind, parts of myself I didn't like or I hadn't acknowledged. And I started to recognize that the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the energetic aspects to myself were actually all one system. and that just working with my mind was not going to shift the patterns of fear or shame that I had to be perfect to feel good enough to belong, or that I couldn't speak my truth and express how I felt in case I was rejected or abandoned. All of those patterns seem to be stored deep inside my unconscious programming and deep inside my body. And I started to realize that just working with my mind and intellectualizing things or reframing situations that hadn't gone to plan, whilst that was helpful, wasn't going to enable me to connect with the trapped emotion in my body and heal emotional wounds which had created limiting beliefs and perceptions about myself. Perceptions that I wasn't quite good enough, or I couldn't speak my truth because I'd be rejected or abandoned, or I'd upset people or cause conflict. And I started to realize that just working with the mind wasn't going to enable me to reconnect with the parts of myself I'd rejected, as I'd learned to believe they weren't worthy of love, connection, or belonging. And it wasn't going to help me reinstate boundaries to create a solid sense of self and show myself I was safe and loved. And it wasn't going to help me be the parent I needed to be for myself, to allow myself to feel whatever emotion I needed to feel, and learn how to take the message from that emotional signpost and express it in a healthy way that didn't break down relationships or cause disease in my physical body because I'd suppressed it. My training into equine therapy in 2018 rerouted me on a journey of deep healing and reconnection with my whole self, where I threw myself into a holistic approach to mental, emotional, and physical health, including Reiki and energy healing, meditation, kinesiology, homeopathy, and yoga, to name a few. And they all supported me through the death of my mother and the breakdown of my marriage. Then, as my life appeared to be entering a new chapter, I was hit by the biggest shock of my life, a cancer diagnosis in 2020. A cancer diagnosis that rocked the whole foundation of who I thought I was. A foundation, as I now know, that was built on a mentally constructed version of who I thought I was, based on limiting beliefs and perceptions that I'd learnt to believe. A foundation that needed a cancer diagnosis to smash it apart and unearth the actual solid foundation of who my heart and soul always knew I was, the truth of who I was always meant to be in the first place, as Paulo Coelho says. My truth that the body is a self-healing organism with cells that are constantly regenerating. It will heal itself if we create the conditions for it to do that. The truth that we are not separate from nature, we are nature. And a holistic approach to healing supports the body to come back into a state of homeostasis where it's able to heal itself. I'd needed that cancer diagnosis to reconnect with the wisdom of my body and heal the unprocessed trauma and emotional wounds that were creating stuck energy in my body and stopping it being in a state of homeostasis and flow where it could heal itself. Further training in 2019 and 2022 as an inner child practitioner and transformational coaching with body wisdom led me to a deeper understanding of trauma and how it gets stuck in our energy and ultimately in our bodies. Quantum physics and Einstein's theory of relativity and his famous equation E equals mc squared defines the equation for energy. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. On the most basic level, the equation says that energy and mass, or matter, are interchangeable. They are different forms of the same thing. So every object has an enormous amount of energy within it. But quantum physics shows us that the amount of energy potential within the space between the solid stuff is exponentially larger than the energy within the solid matter. The space between our cells and the space between our atoms is the source of the most extreme energy on the planet. So just living in a three-dimensional physical world and defining our reality by biology or by solid stuff around us massively reduces our potential and our power. So if our cells are constantly regenerating, why do we hold on to mental, emotional, and physical pain and disease. I believe because the world tells us we're not enough. Unprocessed trauma creates limiting beliefs and perceptions about ourselves, which cause us to hold on to fear or shame or guilt, and then think, feel, and behave in ways that embed those beliefs. Our 24/7, fast-paced, destructive, consumptive, information overloaded world constantly drip feeds the messages that we need to do more, or know more, or be more, or have more. Marketing and advertising tells us we're not enough as we are, and we need to look younger, or be thinner, or eat this, or don't drink that. All that external noise takes us further and further away from our inner wisdom and our inner knowing in our heart and soul. And it keeps us in a disempowered, victim-like state where we feel like we're being done to and have no choices and no control. Two sources of wisdom I've hugely resonated with over the years, have been a big inspiration to me, are Dr. Gabor Mate and Dr. Zach Bush. And Dr. Mate says, disease is an outcome of generations of suffering, of social conditions, of cultural conditioning, of childhood trauma, of physiology, bearing the brunt of people's stresses and emotional histories, all interacting with the physical and psychological environment. And Zach Bush says, if we're going to break humanity free and we're going to move to a point that we're going to stop manifesting more chronic disease with every generation, we're going to have to tap into this regenerative potential. So we have to take back our power, recognize the huge amount of potential we have to tap into when we let go of limiting beliefs, of unhelpful stories and narratives that we've learned to believe about ourselves, or other people's stories projected onto us to keep us small and disempowered, and generational patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving that tell us we're not enough. And all change starts with ourselves. We have to be the change. We have to heal our emotional wounds and our unprocessed trauma. And we have to love all parts of ourselves, which in turn will raise our vibrational frequency, both individually and collectively. Now, I'm not claiming to be a scientist or a doctor, and I'm certainly not a quantum physics professor, but my reading and research around these topics has supported me to take back my power, to listen to the truth in my heart and my soul, and create empowering beliefs, which in turn have created a state of balance in my body where I feel more well than I've ever felt, which to me backs up Bruce Lipton's research around the power of beliefs to shape what happens in our physical bodies. My research and holistic healing approaches have supported me to practice letting go of fear that was causing me to hold on to stories that were keeping me small and keeping me ill. And that's definitely work in progress. Like I said, I'm a lifelong learner and I'm constantly evolving. And Zach Bush explains this much better than I do. So I'd urge you to watch this video or any of his videos on YouTube to access his wisdom. And there's a link to his video on healing disease on that slide. So as I said, Dr. Gabor Mate has been a huge source of inspiration to me. And his work has really supported me to embed beliefs that have been helpful to me, to support me to let go of old unhelpful stories I'd learned to believe about myself, and to really embody a state of wellness. In his wonderful book, The Myth of Normal, he says that it all starts with waking up to what is real and authentic in and around us and what isn't, waking up to who we are and who we're not, waking up to what our bodies are expressing and our minds are suppressing, waking up to our wounds and our gifts, waking up to what we have believed and what we actually value, waking up to what we will no longer tolerate and what we can now accept, waking up to the myths that bind us and the interconnections that define us, waking up to the past as it has been, the present as it is, and the future as it may yet be. waking up most especially to the gap between what our essence calls for and what normal has demanded of us. And in that wonderful book, he quotes V, formerly known as Eve Ensler, author of the Vagina Monologues political play. Now, V survived stage 4 uterine cancer and describes cancer as not a separate thing that has attacked your body. It's energy flow. It's a current. It's evolution or devolution that occurs when you're not awake and connected. And trauma is essentially ruling your life. It's such a mistake to identify it as a thing because that makes it hard matter when it's a much more psychological, spiritual, and emotional condition. In another of his books, When the Body Says No, Dr. Gabor Mate talks about type C personalities, the types of people we might describe as nice or people pleasers, the ones who will never say no to a request and will always put others' needs before their own. So you've probably all heard of type A and type B personalities. People with type A personalities may be ambitious, aggressive, or competitive. And people with type B personalities may be laid back, flexible, and patient. So personality refers to the pattern of emotions, thoughts, and behaviors that make each individual who they are. But Dr. Mate talks about type C personalities. And remember, those are patterns of emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, so they can be unlearned. So these type C personality traits can be linked to emotional wounds where an individual has learned to put others' needs before their own and suppress emotions to avoid making caregivers uncomfortable, because those caregivers were likely not resourced to be able to support the individual to process the emotions in a healthy way and let them go. So if we don't feel worthy of love, connection, and belonging just the way we are, we may seek status to feel important, or we may help others ahead of ourselves. And as children, we don't know how to think, because we haven't developed that part of our brain yet. We only know how to feel. And the felt sense comes before thinking. So what we felt will dictate what we then think when we're able to learn how to think. So those formative years are so instrumental. And the unconscious script we may have learned in those types of emotional wounds are likely to be, I'm only worthy of love if I put others' needs before my own, for example. And this is not about blaming parents or caregivers. It's about understanding our 95% unconscious programming so that we can take responsibility for how we now show up in life, so that we can live a heart-led and healthy life. We can meet our own needs and empathize with others and show compassion. So that type C personality, that was me, the people pleaser, the person who suppressed her emotions and didn't speak her truth for fear of being rejected or abandoned, or upsetting people or causing conflict. That was me until I learned how to find my voice and start to take back my power through holistic healing practices, through Reiki and energy healing, meditation, kinesiology, and homeopathy, and through the inner child process, which I now practice with clients, and somatic exercises to help release stuck energy from my body. And as I mentioned, it's still a work in progress for me, and that little girl within me still needs regular reassurance that I've got her back and I'm going to keep her safe, especially in public speaking situations like this, which are way out of my comfort zone. But I also know it's my opportunity to practice what I preach and show that little girl within me that it's okay to not be perfect. And the success is in doing my best. So over the last 4 years, I've hugely resonated with the work of Dr. Peter Levine, with his 45 years experience of helping people heal from trauma and his somatic re-experiencing approach. He talks about how animals in the wild perfectly model how to complete the trauma cycle. When they're faced with a threat by a predator, a huge amount of energy is produced to make them strong to fight that threat or run away from it. The fight or flight response discharges that energy from the body. But the other survival response is the freeze response, where the biology of the animal tells them they're more likely to survive if they play dead. And when the threat has passed and the predator is no longer a threat, they shake vigorously and breathe deeply to release the energy that's been charged. But because of our conditioning and our social needs to belong to something bigger than ourselves, humans are not so good at this completion of the trauma cycle in order to come out of that freeze response, having been faced with a real or a perceived threat. So we suppress the emotion. And that creates blockages in the flow of our energy and blockages in the body's ability to heal. It creates avoidance strategies where we distract ourselves from feeling what we've labeled as negative feelings, and where we've added a narrative that we're not good enough or we can't speak our truth, as we'll be rejected or abandoned, in my case. So a body in freeze is working overtime to constrict against movement. So every desired expression from speaking, moving, and doing is literally held back by the muscles of your body. So reconnecting with the body in a safe and gradual way enables you to reconnect with the stuck energy so it can be felt and released. Releasing that energy then enables you to release the stories that you've attached to the avoidance of those feelings. And in my case, take action and start to gather evidence that it is actually safe to speak my truth without being rejected or abandoned. And I am actually more than enough, just the way I am. So in conclusion, does love triumph over fear? Absolutely. When we can understand ourselves at a deeper level, understand that 95% unconscious programming, we can start to integrate fragmented parts of ourselves that we learned to avoid or deny because they weren't worthy of love, connection, or belonging. We can own our weaknesses and our mistakes, as well as our strengths, so that we don't project parts of ourselves we haven't acknowledged or accepted onto other people. And we can set healthy boundaries to manage our time and our energy, to show ourselves that we respect and value ourselves. And we can show up authentically in relationships and allow ourselves to be vulnerable, which is how we connect from the heart with others. And one lady who I've massively respected over the years, Dr. Brené Brown, quoted, one of my favorite quotes is, "How can you let people see the real you if you're afraid of what they might see?" And that for me has been a huge source of inspiration over the last few years as I've learned to connect with myself. And I've learned to be proud of all the parts of myself that I pushed away or hadn't acknowledged or accepted. And when we show up authentically, people feel safe in our presence. They feel safe in our energy because they can feel we're being real. We're not masking or pretending to be something we're not. So imagine you're the parent, the child who's still within you, that felt sense. That child who needs you as the resourced adult to show them they're safe and loved just the way they are. So my invitation to you is to reparent yourself so that you can be that safe container for yourself in order to feel and release whatever emotion arises. An emotion is a signpost to what makes us feel safe or unsafe, happy or sad or angry. It's supposed to be felt and released, not suppressed. So reparent yourself so you can love all parts of yourself, especially all the parts you learned to believe weren't lovable. And reparent yourself so you don't have to avoid or distract yourself from those parts through busyness or alcohol or drugs or overworking or overthinking. Reparent yourself so you can listen to your needs and wants and clearly communicate them in an adult to adult way. And reparent yourself so you can listen to your needs and wants and set healthy boundaries to manage your time and your energy. And reparent yourself so you can live a heart-led and healthy life, raise your vibrational frequency to co-create a more peaceful world. So as I said earlier, if you'd like a copy of my free guide, 5 Ways to Live a Heart-Led and Healthy Life, please go ahead and scan the QR code on the top of the slide. And if you'd like to receive updates about my forthcoming book called Trust, which is a story of my healing journey following a cancer diagnosis in 2020, then please go ahead and click on the QR code at the bottom of the slide. So it's been a pleasure to join you today. Thank you for having me. And I look forward to speaking to you again.